So welcome, everyone. We are so happy you are here. I'm Peggy Beauregard. Our team, Tina, Cliff, Jonna are here. We hope you enjoy the show today. The reason I love the show and I love you who attend is because you all have curious minds. And curious minds look into everything. And as you may or may not know, we work with you to build your portfolio. And we like you to be curious about what we have available. So I will be sending some things out to you. But in our little book called Choose Happy, there is something called, you can't see it very well, Be Curious. No, I don't know if you know who Brian Grazer is, but Brian Grazer wrote a book about being curious. And this is by Clay Bedford, and it says, you can teach a student a lesson for a day, but if you can teach him to learn, by creating curiosity, he will continue the learning process as long as he lives. And what I love about all of you is you are curious and you are here because you want to learn more. And we are so excited to have Nathan Turner here with us. He is a Canadian. Mm-hmm. He buys and sells notes, and I would like you to learn a little bit more about what he does. He also puts on in Tennessee a diverse mortgage expo, and you might like to go to it because he also teaches a course, and he also plays a game called, I want to call it Hatchet. It's not Hatchet, but it's like a hatchet. What are those called, Nathan?
Axes, but they actually
axes,
but yeah,
axe throwing. He does this axe throwing contest, and he says it's so much fun. So thank you so much for being here, Nathan. Take it away.
Pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you. So yes, I'm very happy to be here. I've learned a lot being on your show and just participating, and so I'm glad to be able to talk. So I've been here before, so if I repeat some things, I apologize, but the truth is I could talk about notes all day long. I love it. I just think it's so much fun. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, I entitled this one Notes 101. So, is my microphone quiet?
No, we hear you.
Yeah?
It sounds just a touch light.
Oh yeah? It's probably just me. But I'll get closer. How's that?
Oh, you're good. I think you're good.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm entitled this presentation Note Investing 101. Just kind of some note basics. I won't get too far into the weeds, but at least enough just to introduce you to the concept if you're not already familiar. So I will share my screen here. Well, let me do this first.
Do you know when your next show is going to be?
Yes, the next one is next year. So it's May 31st and June 1st coming up. And yeah, we'll be back in Nashville.
Okay, good.
So let's get this in presentation mode so it looks a little nicer. If it goes. Sometimes you have to ask it 3 times. There we go. So do you see the presenter slide or you see the actual?
We see the presenter side.
Okay, let's switch that up. There we go. Okay, so this is Note Investing 101, just thinking outside the box and increasing opportunities. So a little bit about myself. Number 1, I'm Canadian. Peggy already said that. I live just outside of Calgary, Alberta, right near the Rocky Mountains, and I absolutely love it. We just bought our ski passes for this year. Super excited for the snow to start falling. We just actually this morning, it was snowing in the mountains, which is great. So looking forward to that. I have been in notes since 2008. I got started creating notes actually, and not even knowing that that's what I was doing. But the more I learned, the more I really enjoyed it. I started buying non-performing notes in 2010 and just kind of went from there. So I've been around for a little while, which means that I've been able to talk to a lot of people, and just, it's like anything else. I would say more so in this business, it is very much just about relationships. So my first note conference that I went to was in 2009 in Louisiana. And since then, I've just been going to different conferences and meeting people and talking to people. I think it kind of helps a little bit that I'm the Canadian guy. So that has helped me stand out just a little bit. This year, I just put together an investment fund, Earnest Investing, and that's for passive accredited investors. We're excited about that. The other thing we did this year was we took over one of these conferences, like Becky talked about, Diversified Mortgage Expo. So it's a great place for people who are in notes or wanting to learn about notes, just to kind of come and meet each other and socialize, have fun. We do the axe throwing tournament the night before the conference, which is just a ton of fun, just a way to break the ice and have a lot of fun together. So that's me. So notes, what is a note? Very basic level. It's a promise to pay. So anytime anyone says, I promise to pay you X amount over so many months at an interest rate of blah, 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 and you write it all down, that's a note. Not all notes are created equals. You can write a good one, you can write a bad one. But essentially, I mean, it's an IOU. If you did an IOU on the back of a napkin, that's a note. What we're talking about, what I do is mortgages, deeds of trust. CFD stands for contract for deed. Those are a lot of seller finance notes. And they can be different names: agreement for deed, bond for deed, land contract, whatever. We just kind of, the umbrella term for those is contract for deed. So I buy a lot of those as well. Other ones that maybe if you are familiar with notes, maybe you haven't heard of these ones. So HECM loans, reverse mortgages, lease options. I've bought lease option contracts in the past, and those work really well, actually. Wrap notes. If somebody's out buying subject to and then creating wrap, that can be a note as well that you can resell. So there are tons of different things out there. You can diversify and go into different kinds. You can specialize in this one versus that one, first versus seconds. There's all kinds of niches within notes. And you can get all kinds of crazy, but it's a lot of fun. So why should we care about notes? Number one, a little bit about my background. I was a landlord on one property for about 3 years. When I first, I didn't intend to be a landlord. I was flipping properties, and then the market changed. This was right in 2007, 2008. Market changed, and I got stuck with this one. So I rented it out because that's what you do, right? So I did that, and I quickly figured out that I really liked the cash flow. And I also figured out that I really didn't like everything else about it. There's nothing about being a landlord that is fun or good except for that cash flow. So as I started creating these notes in 2008 and 9, I again quickly figured out, so I get all the cash flow without any of those headaches, I'm in. So that's a huge plus for me. I really like that. Another reason that you should be interested in this is there's a huge seller finance industry, especially with rising rates. That is increasing more and more and more. There are a lot more people doing this as a business than in the past. It was mostly just like a one-off, a mom and pop person. They had a second property, they sold it on terms. That still happens all the time, of course, but more and more we're seeing people that are acquiring property, however they acquire it, at courthouse steps or whatever, and then reselling it on terms and creating notes, more like as a business where they're doing several a month. And that's big. Last I heard, if I remember correctly, I think they said it was like $13 billion a year in creating seller finance notes. So, I mean, it's huge. There are a ton of notes out there. So it's a good thing just to be a part of, if nothing else. And lastly, just learn, be curious, figure out what else is out there. You never know. The more you know about this, that, and everything else, the more you can insert yourself into different opportunities. So how do you make money with notes? So there are two very basic levels, but again, 101 course. There's performing and there's non-performing. So the performing notes are the ones where the people in the house are making regular on-time payments. So for those, that's straight up mailbox money. You don't have to do anything. You don't own the house. And that's when I first got into notes, that's something I had to wrap my head around. I don't own that property. I just own the mortgage attached to the property, which is great. That means that I'm not responsible for the upkeep of the house. No toilets, tenants, trash, termites, any of that stuff. That none of that's my problem. Banks don't fix roofs. Banks don't unplug toilets. Banks don't do that kind of thing, which is awesome. So it's, like I say, the difference between owning the property versus owning the note. So when we're buying notes, it's just the paper. The property happens to be our collateral, but that's it. So I'm able to, in a way, kind of control the property without owning it, which is fantastic. So the other category I would say is non-performing. I really actually like non-performing. I got started in this, like I said, in 2008. And as you can imagine, there were a ton of these. I started buying in 2010 non-performing. And man, back then you could buy them for like 30 cents on the dollar. It was insane. What that allowed me to do as a beginner was to buy at enough of a discount that I could stumble along and figure it out and make all kinds of mistakes and still be okay, which I did. And I was. And then as I kind of progressed, I got much better at it. And yes, not making nearly as many mistakes. So that's good. But there are tons and tons of ways that this can go. When you own a property, like I say, you can sell it or rent it. That's typically what people think of. So I have those options available to me with a non-performing note. If I take back that property, I can also sell or finance it, which a lot of people don't know about. But with the note itself, we can modify that loan and we can do all kinds of different things with modification. So let's say, just for an example, simple numbers, the house is worth $150,000. The outstanding balance on the property is say $100,000. The person living in the house hasn't made payments for a year. So they've got like a $5,000 arrears sitting there. I come in and I say, okay, what are we going to do about this arrears? How are we going to get you back on track? And it's incredibly common where somebody says, you know what, I had lost a job. I'm back. I'm able to make payments again. And we can do all kinds of things. So we've got that $5,000 arrears. Do you want to pay that up and just reinstate? Are you able to pay a part of that? And then maybe we can forgive it if we want to, or we can tack it back on the loan, or we can make that payable, just the arrears payable over the next 2 years to get that caught up. And the possibilities are almost endless. You can do pretty much anything as long as you and the borrower agree to it. So that, for me, that's a lot of fun. I really like doing that. And I like talking to people and figuring out what we can do together. The downside of the non-performing is that it's somewhat unpredictable in your timelines. You get really great discounts on it and you can potentially make a lot of money if you've done it right. But it's hard to know exactly when that's going to happen. You're dealing with people. People are not always the most logical. And so sometimes you think it could be going this direction and all of a sudden goes a different. And so it's hard to see. I did this just to kind of illustrate a little bit on how that can go, different directions it may go. But the thing you should be looking at is just that right side. Those are all different options, different ways that you can get out of a note, which I think is just great. Tons of options. So a couple of just quick examples. So here's just like plain Jane, white bread, super easy. Performing loan in Chalmette, Louisiana. The interest rate on the loan was 11.25. Loan to value is 33%. So super safe, super safe. Unpaid balance on this, a little over 73,000. Bought this for 70,000 for a 12.5% yield. So regular on time making payments. I just step into the role of the bank. So instead of paying Bank of America, now you pay me. And I bought it at a discount so that my yield is more than the posted interest rate. Nothing changes for the borrower except where they send their payment. So that's super easy. That's mostly what I do these days is performing notes. Just to show you a little bit, a couple examples of other things you can do. This is a lease option, one that I bought. This is in Delaware. I said here's a 9% or no, I changed them to a 9% interest rate. They were on a fixed rate. And so what I did on this case, just to give you an idea, I had printed out an amortization chart of how long it was going to take them to pay off the house with their fixed rate versus a 9% interest rate that I was going to charge them, which is high. And this was maybe a year ago. So this was high. But even with that, it's enabled them to pay off the house so much faster and save a lot of money. So their monthly payment actually went down a little bit and saved them tens of thousands of dollars, about 23 years on their term, and as far as being able to pay it off. Bought this one for $35,000 with the new terms. Now my yield is 16.5. So really good. I changed it over to this contract for deed, partially just to get them a better deal, honestly. And it also makes it more secure for me to be able to sell it. It's easier for me to sell a contract for deed than it is a lease option, just because that's more familiar. Here's, this is a reverse mortgage property. So this is a reverse mortgage where the borrowers were already deceased. So it was in foreclosure. I just completed the foreclosure that was already going. And then I resold the property on terms to somebody else. So I bought this for $67,000, sold it on terms. I got $25,000 down. I think we sold it for $100,000 if I'm not mistaken. Sold it for $100,000, $25,000 down, 10% interest rate over 15 years. So about $700 a month. My yield on that, 17.2. And now that's a performing note that's going to pay for the next 15 years. Probably. And then a foreclosure to sale. This is another one with a deceased borrower. Took this one all the way through. This one was a little bit funky. Once we finished the foreclosure, we figured out that there was actually a second. It was the first lien had been recorded twice by accident. The title should have caught that in the beginning. They didn't. But luckily, relationships, I knew who to contact, and the previous holders of the mortgage to say, hey, this is what's happened. This is the mistake. And they were able to just release that other mortgage. So that got the deal done. So it makes a big difference who you know. Bought this for $72,000, sold it for $120,000. After expenses and everything, we made about 21%. So pretty good. So I added in this slide because this is a question I get all the time. What are note investors looking for? So, and I put this in here because I get approached all the time where people say, how much of a discount do you incorporate? When you're looking at buying a note, what's your discount? And I said, well, that entirely depends on mostly what is the interest rate on the note. So here's a little chart. This is actually a friend of mine put this together, and he said I could use it, but it's pretty good. Just to give an idea. So over on the left-hand side there, that's what the interest rate of the note is. And then my desired interest rate is up at the top. For me in my fund, I need at least a 12%. I target somewhere between 12 and 15%. So if the interest rate on the note is 8% and I want 12, my discount, I'm going to pay you 71.34% of value, whatever the outstanding value is. So if it's $100,000 unpaid balance, I'll pay you $71,340, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. So part of why my friend put this together is to talk to people who are creating notes. Our message to them is don't try to compete with the banks. Don't charge 7% because that's what the bank is charging. If they could get 7% of the bank, they would. So you have a special product, charge more than that 7%. You know, charge 9, 10, 11%, whatever's allowed in your state. And whatever the borrower can handle, yes, jack up the interest rate if you can, as much as you can, so that it makes it more attractive as you resell it and you can get the best price for it. So that was just for illustration purposes of how that would work. And this is, of course, everything else being equal, it's in a good neighborhood. It's not, you know, downtown Detroit or something like that. It's all those other factors. We're just going to pretend all that other stuff is good. So that's note investing. I just think it's cool. It's something different. It's real estate adjacent. It's not real estate. When you get back to the very basics of what a note is, it's a promise to pay. So can you buy a promise to pay? Yes. Can you sell a promise to pay? Yes, you can. So then just think, act, become. That's part of what we try to do all the time, is just become something better. You can think about things, you can do things, but then become something. And that's a big part of just developing yourself. So I've got Diversified Mortgage Expo. I don't remember why I put those in there, but that's what I do. And that's me. So that's my contact information. So I'm open to questions. I know Peggy's always got lots. So
I do. What can I tell you? I have lots of questions because you just bring up all these different subjects, even though you've spoken before. And we'll start with Cliff. He's got his hand up.
Sure.
Well, I thought you were going to ask questions first, but I can if you want. I'm curious, there's a lot of people that are on our call today that have personally invested in real estate that look for opportunities. If someone comes across an opportunity, and the existing owner has an incredible rate, maybe it's like a 2 point something or 3 point something rate on that mortgage right now, what are some strategies that they can actually put in place? And then once they've done that, what are some of the ways that they can move that along that could create a win-win scenario for many people?
So I can speak to the concept on that one because I have never done it personally. But the concept is you can buy the property subject to the outstanding mortgage. So essentially, they just assign that mortgage over to the new buyer. And then you can go back and sell that property to somebody else, presumably for more money at a higher interest rate, creating a wrap loan. Now, that's where I would come in. I want to buy the wrap loan. I don't want to do all the work of creating the note. That's work. I'll let somebody else do that. For me, in that kind of a situation, I would only actually be interested in buying that if my purchase price covers the first loan, meaning we're going to pay off that first loan completely to put me back in first position. So I always want to be in first. That's just me. And there's a lot of people that like seconds, but not me.
I'm going to interject in another thing that one needs to be careful about is you're taking a property subject to, but there might be a due on sale clause, and they could find out if you change title and you change your insurance company, and they might call it because they don't want you in a 2% loan. They want you in a 7.5% loan.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not interested in getting in the middle of all that. I just want payments. That's all.
So here's your
I'll pay off the first. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Cliff. Tina.
So my question is, how do you market for these opportunities? What do you do?
How do I find the notes kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great question. So as you talk to note investors, they will share everything with you except for that. So part of all kinds of things, there's different people do different things. One of the things that I do is I have a podcast every other week with a colleague, and this has been a big focus for us the last year, is reaching out to specifically the people that are teaching creative finance, letting them know. What we discovered is a lot of the people that are doing creative finance have no idea that note investors exist. So we're trying to educate them that yes, we exist. And if you do, a lot of these creative note teachers aren't necessarily teaching how to create these notes properly. So we're trying to educate them to say, listen, if you do it this way, use a mortgage loan originator, go through the proper steps, it makes your loan far more valuable. And we can do this over and over and over again. All we want is the notes. I don't want to go and do the work of creating it. I just want the note. So if they can create me notes, man, we can do a ton of business. So the podcast is a big thing. Diversified Mortgage Expo. That was a big push. We're inviting the creative finance people to come and join us. So just trying to get out there. I've heard people doing postcards. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it, but that's what I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Tina? All right, Ted?
They're all fun, I think. Let's see, Nathan, about 50 years ago, when I was working in the software business, one of the fellows among our employees was a fellow by the name of Nat Turner, I think from Texas. Do you have anybody in your relations that might be him?
Not that I know of.
You never know. It's
You
a
never
small
know.
world, smaller world than you think. And the others, have been a Johnny Carson fan forever. And one of the funniest bits that I ever saw on the Johnny Carson show was the bit with Ed Ames trying to teach Johnny Carson how to throw an axe. Do you remember that bit?
I don't.
Anybody else remember it?
No.
Yeah.
I think I remember him being shown how to throw a knife, not an axe, but a knife on the Johnny
Yeah.
Carson show.
There's-
That's pretty fun.
There are a number of funny incidents, but this is the one where the axe landed in the target's crotch.
Oh, I did see that. Now that you mention that, I do remember seeing that. Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for your presentation today.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, thank
Ted,
you.
thanks. Norma?
Hi, as Peggy mentioned, I'm a commercial real estate attorney in
Yeah.
California. And so one thing that I would mention about the note investing is to, kind of be mindful of the state law of where the property is located. So for example, in California, with a seller finance note, it's not possible to get a deficiency on a foreclosure if the vendor, if there's seller financing. So you may go into a transaction buying a note, the property is, worth less than the note, but at the end of the day, after the foreclosure, you can't get a deficiency. And that's, important to know. So one is, so there are two situations. One is a deed of trust given to the vendor, so the seller, and then also the situation where a deed of trust is given to any lender where it's securing, 1 to 4 family. But I think mainly what you're talking about is, the vendor to any borrower. So, when I'm working on those deals, for example, if I'm representing a seller, they have to get a guarantee, right? Because basically they can't go back against the seller after the borrower after a foreclosure. So, that's California, which is very protective, and other states may or may not have. It's called purchase money anti-deficiency protection, but it's important to know that.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Every state has their own special set of laws. And so, again, this is not real estate. You can't just ride in on a horse and figure you're going to do this. There's a steep learning curve. And so there's lots to learn. I'll talk to you about it, but I'm not going to teach it. There's plenty of people that are teaching. I'm happy to refer to whoever you're most comfortable with. But yeah, every state has their own set of laws. So for example, Georgia, if you own a note in Georgia, even if you're using a third-party servicer, it doesn't matter. You are considered a debt collector. And in Georgia, you need a license to be a debt collector.
Oh.
So you have to go through the process of getting the license and all that. The workaround is don't buy anything in Georgia. So that's what I do. So I just don't buy in Georgia. I don't want to. I'd rather not show up on anybody's radar. And so I just keep my nose as clean as possible. So that's one thing, just as an example. Cook County is notorious for just being just difficult in so many different ways. And so be aware, things like that. There's a lot of rules. There's a lot of things you need to be aware of. So learn the rules. It's doable, but learn the rules.
Thanks for bringing that up, Norma.
So,
So thank you. Matt, welcome.
Good afternoon. Sorry I was late. I was looking forward to this. At any rate, just a commentary. I'm in California and I originate seller finance notes, and I've been doing it for like 25 years. But to point out, I don't work with consumers. So those are all business.
Okay.
transactions. But one comment I wanted to make, and also on Norma's comment there, it seems like if you're dealing with contract of sale transactions, and these aren't actually notes in that case, are they? And to me, it sounds like in that situation where you have a contract for sale situation, maybe you're getting outside of the consumer laws. Do you know?
I
you asking
don't
me?
know. Go
Oh.
ahead, Norma.
Well, I mean, I looked at the code section before this, and the other category where it's you cannot get a deficiency is, they say, after a sale of real property, for failure of the purchaser to complete his or her contract of sale. And so I think that is the, installment land sale contract. And so, you also cannot, they're very rare. I mean, people usually don't do them, but I think
In
that
California,
does
yeah.
describe an installment land sale contract, and you also can't get a deficiency in that situation. But I mainly either work on, well, all that I work on are the, commercial transactions, and the question comes up whether, a lender, like a commercial lender, can get a deficiency after making a sale to enable a purchase, and they can't.
And that's also going to be different between a commercial deal dealing with a business or residential. And that's going to have different rules as well. And so,
Yeah.
there's rules.
This is business purpose, we're fine. It's when you get into that consumer space.
Yeah.
And I would be surprised. Well, maybe not. I mean, California's, they're going to do what they're going to do. So anyway, thank you, Norma, for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it doesn't just apply to the consumer. I mean, the consumer, the prohibition as far as consumer is, for any lender. So, but
Right.
But contract of sale is not your contract of sale is like a rent to own, right? So you're not. The question is
that's a third category.
Does the person have to be qualified under the federal and state protected category in order to engage in those transactions?
For residential
versus a loan scenario where all the regulations apply on a land contract sale. Do those same regulations apply?
So, and you're talking about Dodd-Frank?
All of them.
Yeah.
Dodd-Frank, Reg Z, I mean, you name it.
So I can talk to Dodd-Frank a little bit. Dodd-Frank is a consumer, like a residential consumer set of rules. And yes, if you're doing a contract for sale, a contract for deed, yes, that still applies. You still have to qualify them.
Wow.
And it's
that's why they're not happening.
In
California.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And again, it depends on who you learn the business from. If you learn from one of the guys that you see on Facebook,
even the broker underwriting the deal is at risk in that case.
And use a licensed mortgage loan originator.
Still, I mean, I've been one for 26 years. I wouldn't underwrite that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That sounds crazy. Anyway, thank you.
But every state's different. So, yep, make sure you know the rules.
Okay, thanks for that. Alvin.
Hi.
Hi.
How's everybody doing?
Haven't seen you for a while.
It's been a while. Interesting stories to tell. But anyway, I I had a couple of questions. The first question I had was in regard to, we were talking about a subject to scenario earlier, and you said that sometimes they get a little messy, and that you don't prefer to deal with those. Typically, when I come across those situations, I just always assume that the bank is going to do a due on sale, call it in. And so, typically we just go into it with the idea that we have to create a trust and, put both parties in the trust and then do the, transfer of beneficial interest later on. Is that something that you would actually entertain in those scenarios?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure. Like I say, for me, ideally, I'm just going to pay off the first so that I'm back up in first position. So would trusts work? My gut instinct is no, but I don't really know. That's a good question.
Okay.
Does anybody else know?
And paying off the first, I mean, doesn't that just depend on how much the first is?
Yes. And
Yeah.
so if so I was just looking at a deal this week. The balance on the first was about 120,000. Property value is 200, but the person who was selling the note wanted 120 for it. Or sorry, the balance of the first was more than what she was asking. And so I said, well, unless you're coming to the table to pay the extra, whatever it was, $5,000 or $7,000 to pay off the first, then for me, it's a no-go. And of course, that doesn't make sense for her. And she was trying to tell me, well, it's got so much equity in it. As a note buyer, I don't care. Past about 20% equity, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make it any more attractive because I'm just looking for yield. So if there's a ton of equity, 80% equity, okay, cool. But it doesn't make it more attractive. It doesn't make me pay more for that.
Gotcha. Okay. And these are only single family you're talking about, right?
For me, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you don't buy any commercial?
I never have. I'm curious. I've always been curious. My biggest stumbling block is I don't know how to value a commercial deal. when
Hey,
you're
call
talking
me.
about notes.
I'll
Okay.
help you value that. It's
Okay.
easy.
I've sure.
Also, Nathan, I did want to, as a former resident of Detroit, I was actually born there, and I have plenty of family members there. So we were always looking for deals back there
Okay.
as well. And I can honestly say there are good parts of the city, as well as the bad. So
Absolutely.
and having said that, that's always the challenge when it comes to finding the financing for some of the deals back there, especially when you start talking about refis and they're under $100,000.
Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, is I know you made the comment earlier, but would you ever entertain anything in Detroit, especially if they're in the good areas?
Yeah, most definitely. I've bought a lot of notes in Detroit. And what I found, and this is going back a few years, is in some cases, it was almost like block by block kind of a situation where this block was great, that block not. So the underwriting due diligence, especially talking about the property value, is a little bit more stringent in that situation, but definitely I've bought a lot of Detroit notes.
Okay.
I got that. Oh, thank you, Alvin, very much.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and Nathan just wants to make sure he's in a more secured position.
Yeah.
So that's not a word that you used at all, Nathan, but when you own the note, it's secured by the property. So you have, and that word secure, actually in this case, it means security, unlike SEC rules where you're in a stock and they
Yes.
call it a security, it is not a security. What's securing it? In the case of real estate, the real estate secures the note.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that.
So
Also,
Any-
does it? I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to verify. Does it have to? Do they all have to be with an MLO? Because I know quite a few people that do deals without an MLO involved, but they're
not
still having
necessarily.
good notes and good returns on them.
What
So-
we're talking about buying and selling notes is different than when you're actually selling a property to a person, consumer.
If I come across, and when I come across notes that were not created through an MLO, it's not necessarily a deal breaker, but I am going to probably requalify that borrower. So if there's a very low chance that borrower is going to qualify, then that's a deal breaker. But if they're close and if there's something we can do to help them get over that hump, then for sure. I might discount that a little bit more because there's a little more work involved for me, but yeah.
So, and then with your qualifications, what sort of standards would you be looking for? I mean, because you're not necessarily a bank, obviously, but
Yeah.
are you going to go that route, or will you be a little less stringent?
Less stringent. However, the biggest qualification requirement is just the ability to repay. That really, when we get into Dodd-Frank, in its essence, there's it's a little bit messy, but in its essence, that's the purpose, is to make sure that the borrower has the ability to repay. So I have to be able to demonstrate, the borrower has to be able to demonstrate that they have that ability with their income versus their payment amount, so that we can make sure that there's, you know, a good chance that they're going to be able to continue making payments. We don't want to set them up to be overpaying so that they default. That's not the point. I don't want the property. I really don't. So I don't want to have a situation where there's a good chance they're going to default. So that's the long answer. Yeah.
That's probably where a lot of your lease options come from, right?
Yeah, the lease options, and again, I'm a fan of those. To me, I think a lease option is a bad deal for the occupant. So I want to get them into something where they're charged a regular interest rate, because it's a better deal for them. When they're doing just a flat fee, they're going to pay forever. So if I introduce an interest rate, even if it's a high interest rate, it more than likely it's going to be a better deal for them. And then that's a better deal for me too.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Well, Tina disappeared. She had her hand up. I wanted to ask, oh, Tina, you have another question?
I was just gonna ask where or what's your where are your markets?
Oh, great question. So for me, I actually prefer loan balances under 200,000. So when we're talking about California, pretty much not. So it tends to
We
be,
saw the prices of the houses. We knew they weren't in California, just so
Yeah.
you know.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It tends to be the eastern half of the country. So everywhere from Texas to Michigan, everything else in between. So Tennessee, Alabama, Carolinas, I mean, Ohio, Indiana, wherever, all over the place. I have bought notes in Nevada and Arizona and Colorado, but they just don't come up that often in that kind of price range.
Thank you.
And less now.
Yes.
Yes, all those Californians went out and messed up the rest of the country with their,
Overpaid everywhere else. Yeah.
I think they leave California where a 1,500 square foot house is $1 million, and they go to Tennessee and think that it's cheap, but they didn't check out what's going on in the area to compare apples to apples, not oranges to apples.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, sorry for all those people that live there. Okay, I have a question about, well, I had two questions. So because you are the lender, you are not responsible for the upkeep on property. However, when you sign a regular mortgage from a bank, it has written right in the mortgage that the property must be kept up.
Yes.
I don't know if you have that in your mortgages, but if you're taking over a mortgage, it's already written that way. Do
Already
you
there.
check or have somebody check to make sure people are taking care of the property, or?
I do at the time when I'm purchasing it. So before I buy anything, I live up in Canada. I'm not going to travel all over the US just to go look at properties. It's
Sure.
just not a good use of time or money or anything else.
not?
So I have a local realtor there. They go by and they check out the property. I have not instituted like a regular check. I think I'll do that actually. Now that you mention it, let me make a note.
Hey, you got a daughter. She's got a job now.
Yeah. But we'll have, maybe that's something we can institute. I think that's a good idea, is send out a realtor, you know, every 6 months, a year, whatever, we'll pay him.
Yeah, or every 2 years, a place is going to go downhill that fast.
Maybe once a year. We'll do that. We'll set it up for once a year. They go by and just do, I don't know, we'll call it a wellness check, whatever. And just make sure the house is still there and it looks okay.
Yeah, usually if the lawn's mowed, you know they're taking care of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, minor things.
That's
Or
good.
if the paint's peeling, then you gotta knock on the door. And the other is you do reverse mortgage.
Yeah.
So you buy a reverse mortgage, but a reverse mortgage, they can keep drawing on the equity that's there. So how does that work?
Yes. So I buy reverse mortgages. I buy reverse mortgages if and when the borrowers have passed away.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's when I buy those. And then in that case, sometimes we'll have heirs that kind of insert themselves. Most often not. We'll just foreclose and then either sell the house outright or sell or finance it back out.
Okay. And then you write your own notes on that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And
Yeah.
John,
Hey Nathan, interesting subject. I'm in learn mode here, but on the checking, there are actually companies that do that for a living on behalf of insurance companies and mortgage. I have a friend that does that for a living up here in the Pacific Northwest, and they're out all day driving around, particularly pre-foreclosures and damaged houses to make sure they're getting renovated or that people are still living in them. And I think it's relatively affordable. And
yeah, I'm just thinking we had, I know there's like property preservation companies. I'm sure that's something they would do. So I actually owe those guys a call. So I'm going to talk to them and see if that's something that they offer. But I think that's a great idea, just to check if they're paying their mortgage. Most likely the house is in decent shape, but it doesn't hurt to just send somebody by.
yeah, and he works on behalf of multiple insurance companies and multiple banks, which kind of give you a fractional, right? They've got a route they drive every day and check and
That's good.
Yeah.
services out there. That's all.
and think
Cool,
about
thanks.
that. Nobody's ever come knocking on my door
No.
because they can't find the property, frankly. I get phone calls every time somebody has to deliver something. Where are you? Not telling. Tina, you're up.
One more question for you, Nathan.
Sure.
So you said you have a local realtor in each market.
Mhm.
Do you pay a walk and talk inspection fee? And if you do, how much?
What's a walk and talk inspection fee? I don't know.
So basically, from what I understand,
Yeah.
boots on the ground, the realtor will go out and do like a video and walk around and say, hey,
Yeah.
this, like, so, and sometimes people pay them a fee. So I guess you don't.
So what I do is I usually order a BPO.
Oh,
Same idea. So I'll have a realtor go out and just check out the property, tell me what they think the area, that kind of thing, and tell me what they think the house is worth. And I do that because before I bid on anything, before I offer to buy a note, I've done internet research. I've looked online and I can tell what I can tell online.
mhm.
But it has happened, I think, twice where I've sent a realtor by and they said, well, there's no house there. Good to know. Thank you very much. So what I see online doesn't necessarily reflect what is in front of them. I had another one where the realtor went by and their estimated value was way below what I thought it was. So I do this often where I will call the realtor that did the BPO and I'm not trying to prove a point. I'm not trying to argue. I just, for educational purposes, hey, so I see, your valuation is much lower than what I thought. I'm just curious, why is that? And she told me, well, I went by and the house is obviously vacant. The front door is wide open. And you can see just from the front of the street, you can tell that the house is all trashed inside. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. That's all I need to know. So great. So I just saved myself, probably thousands of dollars.
Right. I
by
heard
not buying that.
once told me that they were bidding on a house and they didn't realize when they went to go and check it, it was in the middle of water. So it was all
Yeah.
underwater. So there
Yeah.
was like in a lake. That's where the house was.
Yeah. So I always send out a local because they know the market, they know the area. I don't. Google's great, but it doesn't know everything.
Good, good. All right, thanks.
Okay, that's great. Are there any other questions? I had one on wraps, but you took care of that. But Alvin had some other questions on it. And
Actually, I could ask another
Sure.
question that may or may not challenge your sensibilities, but what would you recommend? Because you said that you normally don't um, give out the secret ingredients, but what give us like 2 search criteria that you may use.
So okay, I'll give you 2 search criteria, and then I'll give you a website. That it's a note platform where you can go and see notes that are for sale, and it's totally public, and the guys are great, and I'll tell you more about them in a second. But anyway, so one of the criteria, for example, I don't look at anything with a population, like a city population, less than 20,000. And that just comes from my own experience seeing towns that are smaller than that. And again, I'm always planning for the worst case scenario, which to me is I got to take that house back. If I end up taking that house back, can I do anything with it? If it's a tiny little town of 200 people, 2,000 people, chances of me reselling that property are much lower, or at least much slower. And I just don't want to deal with it. So at least 20,000 people, I figure in that case, there's a relatively healthy real estate market where I can resell that house if I need to. So that's one. Another one is, like I say, I'm buying performing notes now. So the first thing that I'll look at is what's the current interest rate. And if it's at 3 or 4%, that's probably a no-go. Just because, again, I'm trying to get to my 12 at least, and my discount is going to be so large that it's probably not going to be a deal. So it's not even worth going through the motions.
Sure.
And putting in, 30 cents on the dollar bid. Nobody's going to go for that. So the website is Paperstack, and it's without a K. So STAC, paperstack.com. And great guys. I met them when they were very first starting out a few years ago. I actually helped them develop their platform so that they could handle contracts for deed, because in that case, you actually have the deed to the property that you have to deal with. And so that's a little bit different. So I helped them develop their system so that they can incorporate that. Great guys. And the system itself, I've seen these kind of platforms come and go, but these guys set it up so that it walks both parties through the entire transaction. So it's, they don't own any of this stuff. Anybody can just go up there and put their note for sale. Anybody can come and buy that note for sale. So, you still got to know what you're looking for and what's a good deal, what's not. But then you connect with the buyer and seller, connect directly, and you go through the steps. So the buyer does this, then the seller does this, and it checks it, and you can't proceed until that's checked. And it's a great system that they've set up so that a brand new note buyer can go through and check all the boxes and know that they haven't screwed up the process, at least, so that they know the process has been done properly. So, and big hats off to those guys. They're great.
Wow, that's great.
Thank you.
That really is really good for the new people coming in, and it's really great for people that are experienced because they know how to get through it quickly, right? They could have all that stuff right there and give it to you the first time, and you could check all the boxes.
Yeah, and I've had a deal on there where I was selling a note, and the buyer came in, and we knew each other already, so we actually we kind of worked outside the system and just did it more quickly. And we just emailed and said, so we've already taken care of all this. Can you just show that those boxes are checked off so we can get to closing? And they said, yeah, no problem. So they checked them off so we could close.
So it's good to know people.
Yeah.
That's great. So does anyone else have any questions? We've got Scott and David. No questions? Paul, what about you? Any questions?
I was
Okay.
wondering if you charge a something like a loan origination fee or something like that when putting the deal together.
I don't, because I'm not originating. I'm just buying an already existing set of terms. Those who are doing the origination, I've heard anywhere from $500 to $1,000 for the origination fee service. So it's not terribly expensive and it keeps you compliant. Well worth it.
Thanks.
You bet.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Paul. So we're at the top of the hour, and I can't tell you how happy I am that you came today. You made my day, and I hope to see you again. I'd like you to come back before May so you could talk about your show coming up.
Oh, I'd love to.
Okay
Yeah, you
with
bet.
you. If that's okay with you, that we're going to let you market yourself on our
That
show.
should be okay.
Okay. Because it's so interesting because people are really curious about how it works. And thank you
Yeah.
very much, Norma, for your input. And Matt has another question.
Sure.
I was just wondering if you could put his contact information up again. It was there, then it was gone. I couldn't get it.
Oh,
Yes.
sure. Go right ahead.
Let me throw it in here.
Or I can email it to you.
Number.
Tell them the number.
There it is.
Now you have to share your screen.
It's in the chat. I just put it in the chat.
Oh, okay, great.
Oh, you know what? I just put it direct to you though.
Oh,
Peggy. Let's try that again.
Oh, yeah, because I needed to get it too. Thanks.
yeah, you did put it direct to me.
It doesn't look like I can do it to everybody.
Really? Well, let's see what I can do.
I can send it to Peggy.
Oh, I
Jenny,
got it.
or Tina.
Okay, it's going to everybody.
There we go. Thanks.
You all see that? So help yourself, give them a call,
Yeah,
Like
be happy
that.
to talk.
let them know that you saw him on the show here, and see what y'all could do together. And don't forget, schedule, do we have an actual date in May? Oh yeah, May 31st to June 1st. So put in your calendars that you're going to be in Nashville, Tennessee on May 31st. Actually, you want to be there on the 30th because there's a game and you
Come
do
and
not
compete.
want to miss that game.
Come and compete. Throw some axes.
Throw some axes. I call
Want
them
some food.
hatchets.
That's a lot of fun.
Are they the long handled?
You normally compete with the shorter ones unless it's a tie, and then you use the big axe to break the tie.
Okay, good. Well, good to know that. Did you have another question, Matt? Okay, good. So thank you very much, and we will see you all next time.
Thanks so much.